Alright everybody, go easy on me for my first video, but please give me feedback so that I can keep creating things that I actually like and things that you might enjoy as well. So this is my first 3D print video. I'm actually printing a baby Mario for my good friend for his baby shower. We call him Yoshi, so what better than this? So again, first print video, but I've done a couple prints and I love working out my setup because it just feels so cozy. So one of the first things I had to do was obviously remove all of the supports, and to do this I got a heat gun to heat it up just slightly enough where all the supports would pry off easily. And just like that, easy. Alright, so it's my first time I'm doing this. Gonna be filling the holes, and then I have to sand everything down. So luckily everything's cured finally, and these are the holes in the back, the drainage holes. This is actually Baby Mario, and there was some extra resin that kind of seeped out, so I have to sand everything down. Also, the little divot holes, so this is going to take quite a bit of time because I need to sand that down. I'm still not where I need to be experience-wise to know exactly where to put the supports and how to do it, but we'll see how this goes. This is going to be an interesting little experiment. Alright, so following that, I decided to use what everybody on Reddit told me to do, was use a toothpick, fill the holes with some resin, and then use a UV flashlight to cure it. As you can see here, that actually did fill quite a bit of the holes, and then not completely, so I ended up using some of the Tamiya plastic putty to fill some of the larger holes like you see on this base. It was just easier to fill it in that way using the plastic putty, and then using a small spatula to smooth it out and make sure that it was fully flat and flushed so that it can dry. And thankfully the Tamiya plastic putty worked wonders on all of the larger drain holes. I couldn't use resin for all of them because it just wouldn't fill the gap, but the Tamiya plastic putty worked perfectly. Now I thought I could use the Vallejo plastic putty to fill the divot holes left by the supports, and it just ended up looking like a teenage 15-year-old going through puberty, as you can see. And I put it in the dehydrator to try to dry it faster, and the next day I went to town sanding everything down. So the base was first and it worked perfectly. The Tamiya plastic putty sanded perfectly. I mean, it could not be better. I used my Rotary sander pen and it was fantastic. Same thing on the smaller items like the egg and on the Goomba. Now, unfortunately, the Vallejo plastic putty didn't work as well because when I was sanding, it just came right off and there was no way to really do it better, rather than just to go back to square one and use resin, as you'll see later on. So thankfully, I recorded a quick update in the middle of everything, and here we go. So quick recap of everything I've done so far. I used the perfect plastic putty to fill all the drainage holes in the 3D models that were printed. And then once it was dry enough, I sanded everything down so it's nice and flush and ready for prime and then paint. So like I mentioned earlier, all the divots were still there even using the Vallejo plastic putty, so I resorted to using more resin and this UV flashlight to fill in some of the smaller holes and some of the larger ones that actually, even the Tamiya plastic putty kind of indented a little bit into it. So again, this is my first time, so if you're watching this and you're still with me on this video, please provide any tips, tricks, comments in the section below so that I can get better, and really appreciate any feedback that you guys provide. So anyways, back to the video. So unfortunately not everything comes out perfectly when you 3D print, as I'm coming to learn, because this foot is supposed to fit onto Yoshi's leg here, but there's a small gap which is going to be really hard to see on camera, but in general it's just not flushed, and that's because maybe there wasn't enough supports and maybe it sagged down while I was printing. That's my guess. But the other foot fits perfectly fine, so you can see how flush this is when it sticks on. Anyways, I'm gonna take the Dremel to the foot to try to bring it down so that the foot actually fits. I busted out my handy dandy Dremel to start grinding down that foot, and it worked amazingly well, better than I thought it would have. I had to be very careful making sure I didn't accidentally drop it and cause an injury, and thankfully I was doing this in my airbrush box so that resin dust was sucked out, and either way I was wearing my mask just for safety reasons. So once all this was done, I primed. I got lazy, instead of using my airbrush, and I used a Mr. Surfacer base 1000 white to prime everything before going to start painting with the airbrush. And I needed to figure out exactly what brown to use for the shoes and for the Goomba, so luckily I had some different model airs, and I really just went to town. There was no specific incorrect shade that I thought I could use, since I could always blend everything together, just like I'm doing on the base here. I started off with a very light brown, and then eventually moved to a little bit of a darker one and a lighter one all the way at the end, just to provide a little bit of contrast and kind of make it look like it's realistic dirt for the model itself. So this is what I ended up with, and I was actually very satisfied with the end. And I want to point out, this is the first time I'm actually airbrushing a model. I usually paint it with the brush, but I wanted something that looked clean without the brush strokes. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't have to break out the brush for the fine details like the hair, the eyes, and all the places that I couldn't get to with the airbrush. And to put everything together, I use Gorilla Glue. It's always worked for me, but again, this is my first time kind of expanding, so if there's anything that you would recommend, leave it in the comment section below if you don't mind. I'd greatly appreciate it. And everything is coming together beautifully. I ended up providing a gloss varnish over the top of pretty much everything before I hit it with the final can of clear. And while putting everything together, I used a can of compressed air to quickly dry the super glue. I noticed that the heat gun actually caused it to melt back, so with some of the Gorilla Glue and then the can of compressed air, it actually expedited that drying time. And you can't see my face, but believe you me, I am beyond ecstatic with how this turned out. This is only my third or fourth model that I've done, and I took a lot of time on YouTube to research things before actually doing something as intricate as this, but I hit it with one last coat of clear and it was finished. Alright, so I finished that baby Yoshi about a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago, and I'm recording this now as I'm still editing the video. And I just wanted to be honest and say, please provide any comments if you made it this far in the video, suggestions all the way down at the bottom. Follow along for my journey as I continue to print and do Gunpla and just be creative. It's a great creative outlet. And stay tuned because I'm working on some really great projects. There's one in the background there. That's gonna be a Christmas gift for someone very special. And I'm excited to get that done. So anyways, thanks for sticking along and I will see you guys on the next one.